welcome to Past, Present, and Future, or Three Questions, the podcast where we learn about people's career journeys, how they got to where they are today, and where they'd like to go to next. I'm Parrots Cohen, a technologist and a wordsmith, and in my time in industry, I've been fortunate to work with both large companies and small startups alongside a number of very talented and hardworking individuals. This podcast is some of my conversations with them, where we learn about their journeys and what motivates them. If you'd like to be in the podcast, please feel free to reach out. You don't have to have a certain level of seniority or a number of years of experience. We all have something to share and learn from each other. If you'd like to sponsor the podcast or get involved in the collaboration, we'd also like to hear from you. All right, looking forward to our journey together as we learn more about each other and enrich ourselves in the process.
Hello, everyone. Today we have with us Greg. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
To start things off, let's talk about the beginning of your career, how everything started, what that looked like. What were those initial milestones?
Yeah, good question. So I, like most recruiters, probably didn't plan on becoming a recruiter. I fell into it. I used to be in the music industry beforehand and running events and all of that good stuff. And then, and DJing, and then fell into recruiting after I wanted to pivot my career. I wanted to go into something meritocratic that I could work my way up, potentially relocate internationally. And I fell into sales. And then someone was like, you'd be great in recruiting. So I looked into that. And, you know, it is a whole new world. If you're a people person, it's great because you have that part, I guess, kind of naturally. But then from a way of working, you have to learn your industry, you have to learn sales, you have to learn actual people management, process management, selling your service as well as selling opportunities. So milestones there were really learning. It was like crash course in learning. And then it was all about production because it's a performance-based role, especially on the external agency side. So I think the first couple of promotions were probably biggest milestones, and coupling that with really embedding myself and understanding and learning my chosen industries at the time.
I see some parallels from what I see kind of, and if we can talk a little bit about, I think even within music as well, there is a little bit of that kind of that branding yourself and kind of making those connections and kind of making sure your service is a fit for the right audience. Have you seen kind of some of those kind of crossovers, kind of looking back in your career and kind of into where it led?
You know, I never thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, because both of them are people. You know, when you're running events or networking, it's all about people. It's all about yourself, your brand, your network. Whether you're in, you know, trying to sell tickets or to an event or get people interested in doing parties with you and business opportunities, or in the recruiting world, same thing. Now, I think zooming out and looking at how I've positioned myself with my own business, it's been a lot about personal and business branding, about networking, reputation, and really building those relationships that you do in all of that. I think when you're selling, and I really don't really like the phrase or the words selling because I want people to work with me and it's more soft selling, right? People buy from people, and if they like you and if they like their experience and perspective and insights that you can share and how you conduct your business or how you conduct yourself and how you handle their issues and their circumstances, they're more likely to gravitate towards you. And there's definitely parallels there. I was also in the music industry before social media was really a thing. It was like, I think just MySpace at the time. So you couldn't really put out a lot of stuff and just get found online and be like a de facto, you know, influencer, subject matter expert without doing anything, which you kind of see these days. Barrier to entry is lower, I think.
I think to that point though, and what I've seen in my own kind of just understanding the trends and thinking about it, I think a lot of those offline approaches translate to online. A lot of those same things that make you successful in an offline setting make you successful online and vice versa. But that's a whole nother existential discussion.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Transitioning into what you are doing today, into the services that you offer, into the business that you've built, would love to learn a little bit more about Samson Rose.
Yeah, sure. So Samson Rose, we're a boutique search firm, primarily working on the robotics, hard tech, and AI industries, normally at that intersection of hardware and software. So there's a lot of overlap there, whether it's advanced manufacturing, actual robots, robot brains, actual, generative AI systems in some respect, and then drones, autonomous driving, etc. So the hot space right now, I think you could categorize it as, but when we started, it definitely wasn't. There wasn't as much interest. There wasn't as much investment, and generative AI, the chat GPTs and Anthropics of the world weren't around, at least in the public domain like they are now. So we primarily work with startups, early stage through to about Series B, Series C is our sweet spot. We work with larger companies, public companies, and multinationals as well, and add great value there. But my personal background, I've been internal at startups as well, work directly with founders and leaders and help advise as well as the actual filling of roles. So I don't know, it's closer to my heart, and I think we add more value to them and their team and their processes along the way. And yeah, it's been a fun journey so far. It's like 6.5 years in.
From your vantage point, working with different startups, working with larger players in the industry, what have been some interesting trends that you've personally found fascinating when it comes to robotics, when it comes to this convergence of AI and robotics into kind of what those potentialities may be?
You mean from like an industry standpoint, or just like the world itself?
It could be industry, it could be the world itself. I feel like when you're immersed in a company in the way that you are within talent acquisition, you get to see things that maybe someone sitting on Wall Street or someone deep in the data doesn't see, because you have a more kind of broader scope of vision.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that slightly from a vantage point standpoint. I also have a podcast, and I interview founders, leaders, and investors in the space. So even if I'm not working with them, I'm still learning and having these really interesting conversations that blow my mind every week. So I think the rate of acceleration in technology right now is something like I've never seen before. And when I speak to people, I haven't been around for decades and decades in the industry, but people that I know that have been 40 years plus in robotics, they tell me like this rate of acceleration with AI and the reduction in price of hardware, it's crazy. It's crazy. But I also think that the time in the industry of adoption is pretty unique. I'd mentioned, the chat GPTs and Anthropics, just AI in general. It's been around for ages. Even when we started the business, we've always been hiring for AI and just different flavors. But I think with the public awareness and adoption of AI, if you're speaking to your parents or your in-laws at Thanksgiving 5 years ago about AI, that was never happening. But now everyone's using it, everyone's got it on their phone, and they're open to adopting that technology. And that's really the ripple effect that we're seeing after that, is all the investment comes into the space, and now people are more aware, and they're maybe following social media platforms or news outlets are covering what these robots can do, robots in the home, robots in the workplace, automation in general, because how people are utilizing AI is just the tip of the iceberg. Then they'll be more open to bringing these other systems. Maybe they're still AI systems, much lower barrier to entry, right, with software. But when you're bringing hardware into your place of work or your home, it's a closer reality than a lot of people think, coupled with that rate, the acceleration of technical advancements. So it's a super, super interesting time. And I see this in every industry, right? There's some that are so much further ahead, like logistics and manufacturing, that have been adopting automation and robotics technologies for years, agriculture, food tech. But then there's others now that we're seeing, right, being advertised to consumers, humanoids in the home and things like that, that it's within our lifetime, and sooner rather than later, I think it's going to be a reality, but there's still a lot to get over before that can happen en masse and safely.
So it's like both seeing it from like that long tail kind of in an industrial scale where that's happening, and then seeing it happen at a consumer level in terms of adoption and all kind of the investment and development that follows that.
Sure.
Um, I want to kind of circle back to something you said earlier, which I think is very powerful. You spoke a little bit about selling kind of not being a great word to capture what it is that is done successfully in a relationship business when you're soft selling, when you're building relationships. I would love to like learn a little bit more about kind of about your philosophy about that and what makes it successful. Because my personal belief is that when it's done correctly, it's not something that is draining because it's not extractive, it's additive. So it
Yeah.
gives not just the person you're giving value, but also yourself. You get value out of that because you're not running from an extraction mindset.
Yeah, I think you put it perfectly. The industry, I think sales in general, right? Whether you're in a SaaS sales role, if you're knocking on doors, or if you're recruiting and selling your service, a lot of them are just purely driven by KPIs, right? You need to find X amount of ideal companies, X amount of ideal customers within those companies, which would be, in our case, hiring managers or founders. You have to do X amount of outreach and X amount of resumes sent and all of this stuff. And it's just like, yes, data is important, and yes, they are indicators, but I'm always a quality over quantity. So if you're just spamming, which the recruiting industry, like, let's be real, gets a very bad rap, especially if they're going with lower experienced employees and just teaching them and managing them by KPIs. The quality control isn't really there. So I've seen that firsthand, right? And that's the way that I built my career, and I saw it. I grew up in England, started my career in London, and that's like the birthplace of the sales recruiting world. So it's saturated, it's tried, tested, proven, very competitive, and you can see what that's done to the industry over there. So when I started my own business, there were a lot of things I did that if I worked for another company, if I worked for a bigger organization, I wouldn't have been able to do. One was the market that I chose. Two is the way that I was deciding to build the business. And three is the emphasis that I put on relationship building and events. I guess for the podcast, right? Because that has been very instrumental in how I've got to the place that we are right now. But to your point, it's definitely additive and it's energizing, because for me, I always lead from a point of like adding value to others before I'm trying to get anything from them. So you can speak to any list of my clients. Like before we've even engaged in a search or talked about hiring for them, I've probably introduced them to investors or sent them relevant events or told them about events that I've been at or shared podcast episodes or invited them to be a guest. All of these things to build credibility and build a relationship and actually put them in a position where they are successful. I want to see them be successful. I want to see them grow, because if they do, then hopefully we will work with them down the line. If we don't, it's just great for the ecosystem in general. And it's good faith, right? I'm doing stuff for them. Hopefully in time it comes back and happens for me. If not, worst case scenario, good connection, good conversation, maybe a good podcast episode. And that's it. There's nothing that's taking away or that I'm expecting from them in return. It's just all positive, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And that is a hard thing to quantify. How many of those conversations should you have to create business? And a lot of people don't like running a business that way. We're lucky because, I am lucky because I'm running a boutique search firm. So I primarily bring in the clients and the business and manage the searches, but I also have my team that help me with headhunting and sourcing and screening candidates, because the reality is not one person can't do all of it at the level that our clients expect or that I would expect from our brand. Or I guess I could, but at a much lower volume.
And I think like that's the difference, because you can view conversations or touch points as a funnel and you're trying to funnel in a certain amount of leads, or you see each of these individual leads for what they are. humans you're building relationships with, and that changes. It allows you to have it be more of a marathon and not just a sprint towards a short-term goal, and enables that long-term thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that one little addition to that is recruiting is a people business, right? I've said this before, but we're people finding people for people to do people things, right? So people always ask about like AI, is that going to take it over? And it's like, there's a human element that you just personally, maybe I'm biased, but I don't think you can replace. And when you go that extreme of just complete automation, it's very easy to turn off, or there's no, we find people full-time jobs, right? It's a life decision. It's not, I'll download this app, or I'll sign up for this service that I can turn off anytime. Like, that's an easy sell because the commitment's not there. But if someone has to relocate or speak to their spouse or leave somewhere that they've been for 5 years and they've got equity and they've got like relationships, there's so many other factors there that if you remove the human part or the lens of that human element, I think it's a slippery slope.
And like the thinking is kind of thinking like through, like, it's not something you can abstract it down to like, oh, I'll kind of feed it on like training data for like words to say that are comforting for making a move, because we've all experienced what that looks like, and it rings disingenuinely.
Yeah.
So then the question would be, are there areas within talent acquisition that you think AI can be helpful, and not something where it's like, where it's going to replace it all with AI, but it can actually help improve the workflows or really kind of take out some of the churn or static out of the process?
100%. Yeah. And we are, I don't want to say AI native, but we adopt AI tools and systems wherever we can, where it makes sense. And there's a lot that we've looked at and tried that just don't make sense. So they make the process a little bit more convoluted or frictiony. Even as simple as the way that we will automate email outreach to people, it's not, hey, just create this big list and start spamming people. We go through each profile individually to identify who we want to add to our lists. And I've cut services with certain platforms that make even the formatting look like it's automated, or make the formatting look like it's spammy. But there's a lot of areas that we are having success, right? Sourcing, for example, there's a ton of new sourcing tools out there. And we use AI native sourcing tools for identification and research and reaching out to relevant people. That helps a ton and saves a lot of time, and also unearths industries, businesses, and people that we wouldn't otherwise not have seen if we use just traditional methods. There's also note taking, AI note takers, we see them everywhere, but once you found a great one, it changes the game for you. And then there's back-end automation, right? How these things feed into each system that help you. And it just allows you, it's not replacing your human part, it's getting rid of the grunt work. Because it used to be you have a 15-minute or 30-minute call with a candidate or client, then you're manually taking notes, you have to manually take those notes, clean them up, put them in your system, make them readable, make them shareable, create whatever document you need, then go from there, post the job, or share the resume with the client. There's so many manual steps that you have to factor in an extra 30 minutes of admin afterwards that now AI is changing if you adopt it properly. And there's a lot of research as well in there that AI, if you get the right agent or the right tool or right workflow, that can really help. And it just allows you to do more with less. I am not at the place where I agree with or see, for us at least, the value of like AI screening, because there's agents they're voice agents that will screen candidates. I definitely think there's a place for that, don't get me wrong. I've worked in industries for companies that have like very high turnover. You get your hourly employees in like restaurants or logistics spaces that their turnovers are 150% a year. So it's a constant revolving door, right? You have to be filling, and it's not as sophisticated as a screening call, and people's expectations are less. But that same thing isn't going to work for a top 5% PhD student that's been researching generative AI for the last 4 or 5 years that everyone wants. They're not going to be receptive to an AI screening tool just because the recruiter doesn't have the time to pick up the phone and call them.
I tried out one of those tools when I was curious. I'm like, let me see what that's like. It was a little surreal. It was very, I would say it's very ego boosting, because like generative AI does, it kind of like, oh my gosh, your experience is amazing. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't know I was that impressive. But to your point, it definitely, it speaks to effort. And I think the through line of what you shared is it's human connection, it's human intention. And at the end of the day, we want trust that if we're building ventures or we're building these startups, that we can rely on the partners that help us bring the right people to build a team together. And building a team is like building a product, if not even more important, because especially in a scaling startup, who you choose today to work on this growth initiative becomes the COO down the line. So it's
100%.
definitely, it's like generational thinking to a sense.
I agree. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I feel like there's a lot of themes that we discussed, I think that will resonate with audience and bring a lot of value. We touched on a lot of areas and disciplines, and really appreciate your insights.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation. Got to talk about things and perspectives that I don't usually get to talk about. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome.